And welcome. Well, obviously, our 3-day mourning has begun, and why not? What a sad incident on the 3rd of July. Many of us think it was just a blessing, one good rainfall, which many countries would have begged and asked for. For us, we get this blessing, and it becomes an absolute catastrophe. I mean, the flooding and the lives that have been lost. But in the aftermath, what have we learned from it, and what are we doing different? Mainly, we are trying to find whose fault it was that the floods came. Is it just an act of God? Could the city have been more prepared to make sure that it didn't have caused so much mayhem? But either way, after all is said and done, there will be another June, and there will be more rainfalls. Are we putting anything in place to make sure it doesn't happen again? This thing goes back all the way to 1964. And somehow, each year we miss the boat. We become like the proverbial vulture. As soon as it dries up, he promises to build his nest. And as soon as it gets wet, he says, as soon as it gets dry, I'll build my nest. Here we are today. Which is the best way forward as we mourn? Well, my name is Nana Sakwao, and this is PM Express. I'm going to take a break, and then when I come back, I'll introduce my guest. Don't move. Well, thank you very much for staying, and we are looking at the aftermath of July 3rd. Indeed, it's a very, very sad incident, and I think we're all in agreement that 3-day mourning is in line, flags at half-mast. But I think the big questions haven't been answered. Could it have been stopped? Should this carry on going until when? But with me, joining me on the phone is Dr. Theophilus Richardson, who is also a social scientist, to discuss the chronology of our floods and where we can go from here. Dr. Richardson, if you can hear me, you're welcome.
Good evening.
Brother, it's a sad day for us. I mean, the 3rd of July, the rains came, and after the rains, the amount of lives or souls that we have lost, the amount of damage that we have lost. Can this continue, and do we have that willpower to let it stop? Because indeed, the job ahead is not easy. Can we stop these floods?
Good evening to your cherished viewers. And I think the volume on your side is a little too low for me.
Okay, let me pick my voice up a bit. I was talking about what we can do as a nation to make sure that come next year when the rains come, we won't be out there, giving out, aid because they got flooded. I mean, we would have solved the problem. Can we do that?
Okay. Nana, I'm sorry to have been unable to come to the studios tonight.
Yeah.
This is a very important subject. In fact, it's a Black Wednesday as it has been appropriately described by various commentators. And I think the issue throws up this disaster, more than a disaster, throws up a number of issues. It has several dimensions that need to be discussed. I mean, ecological or environmental, political, social, economical, and we need to look at it from that holistic perspective. Now, if we put this in perspective, then we will describe it, not just as a disaster, but as a calamity. I don't know. Only yesterday or the day before yesterday, this weekend, about 36 people were killed, in Sana, 36 Hutu rebels, when the Hutu military camp or whatever headquarters was bombed. And it was a running, headline news in the international media for a long time. When 50 people are killed in a day in Kirkuk or Tikrit or whatever in Iraq, or even Afghanistan, it also becomes a major headline news. So to lose officially put 136 people, unofficially, more than 200 people within a matter of hours, 2 hours, or even a little less than 2 hours, it's a major catastrophe that must not be in any way compromised, in our discussion of this disaster or whatever it is by political considerations. I've heard that some members of the Council of State have called on various commentators or sections of society not to blame anybody. And I beg to differ. Mm-hmm. It is not without good reason that we put in place a group of people that we call government, into whose hands we entrust our resources and our even cede part of our rights, so that the state only the state can use force, to enforce the will and the sovereignty of the state. So this is a very major matter that people who are in positions of responsibility must accept their responsibility. I think in the first place, we have issues relating to spatial planning, and then issues relating to refuse collection or dumping, and then issues relating to development of real estate, residential, commercial, and industrial, as well as the security issues, which should underpin all of this. And whether or not this would occur next year, as we have seen in previous years, depends on, first and foremost, how we diagnose the problem. Because it is the diagnosis of the problem that will lead to effective therapy, for a lasting cure.
Dr. Richards, the problem was diagnosed in, I think, 1964. So the problem has been diagnosed. I mean, the major part of the problem has been diagnosed, and the little ones, the odd blocking of drains and the odd building in the waterways, have all been diagnosed. I don't think there's anything else.
Nana, I don't hear from you, but if you hear from me, why do people build on waterways? If this is not the time for us to go into the history of Accra, but we hardly see certain parts of Accra experience floods, with all the catastrophic consequences. For example, Adabraka, because Adabraka was planned, built for civil servants or by civil servants. Asalam Dam was planned. And even more recently in our contemporaries, although it's been a lot while since the mid-70s, Dasuman was planned, except the Adenta floods. All the developments in Adenta were not properly planned. Okay? So, if Accra was properly planned, or if there was a plan and we did follow the plan, we wouldn't be seeing this. And we must not throw it under the carpet that people do this and do that. People also did that because the successive governments, abdicated their fundamental responsibility to deliver its services to the people. Basic services, environmental, ecological, social services. I mean, before 1982 revolution, the onset of 1982 revolution, we had district councils or urban councils, and each council, had vehicles, let's call it refuse collection vehicles, to put it simply. And each town was divided into neighborhoods, and each neighborhood had a refuse dumping area or incinerator. We all carried refuse to our incinerators, okay? And then we also, most homes had pit latrines. And each council had a vehicle for emptying pit latrines. And Ghanaians or people were employed to perform that job.
These flats go beyond.
What happened? The point I'm driving at is that the 19 years of PNDC NDC rule, was marked by fundamental abdication of the provision of these services.
Oh, hold on, because I think hold on. No, doctor, during PNDC rule, and I hate to mention names, but let me mention names.
I don't hear you clearly.
I said during the PNDC rule, I remember, we went out, and big men really came out. And when I say big men, I'm talking Dr. Fori, Ebele Duse. I mean, and these were really big men. We all came out and cleaned the area on Saturday. So I think during the PNDC era, we did a lot. But hold on, let me acknowledge Abraham Amaliba, legal practitioner. My brother, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Doctor, I'll let you land, but you hold on one second. Let me
let us exhaust this problem.
No, but we can't exhaust it. So let me bring Abraham in, and then I'll come back. I'll come back to you.
You said something about the PNDC time. I didn't hear you clearly. What I mean is that there were certain policy shifts, and these policy shifts created a vacuum, or led to the abdication of the government's responsibility to deliver on certain services. And ultimately, by the late 1980s, we had there were attempts to either privatize, in fact, to privatize refuse collection and all that, which culminated in the formation of the city and country waste and all that. And we know the problems, that were associated with these arrangements. The belief was that if the government, the frontiers of the state were rolled back, and private sector would move in to take up certain responsibilities or perform certain services. But this was a belief. In most cases, in most developing countries, the private sector did not exist, or where they existed, they did not have the capacity. And so there has been this big lacuna or vacuum in the performance of certain services. What happened was that we were encouraged to participate in communal labor, digging gutters ourselves and all that. And I mean, that institutional breakdown, could not be, compensated or whatever by individuals performing communal labor.
Dr. Richardson, now hold on for me. Let me bring your brother in here. I have Abraham Abaliba, legal president. Abraham, you're welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Very sad day. We're discussing the aftermath. Somewhere, finding which way forward from here. We're also trying to find out whose fault it is. I think every single aspect has been broken down, from the major to the little to the blocking of drains to the everything is falling down. But being that you're a lawyer, I want to find out which is the way forward from here, and do we blame the bigger, who caused the bigger, because I think we can apportionate the blame, and the one who takes the biggest, penalize them or something. How do we go forward?
Let me say that geographically, Accra is situated in a low-lying area. If you want to know whether what I'm saying is true or not, you have to, when you are approaching Accra from Kumasi, you go to Nsawam, you see Accra and the lights, you see them, you see the whole of Accra in a low-lying area. When you are coming from Ebri, you also see Accra in the valley. Now, all that water that rains on the mountaintop seeps and runs into Accra. Now, what is supposed to happen is that when the water then comes to Accra, it's supposed to run into the sea. But human activities does not allow the water free access into the sea, because we've built to block the waterways. And as a result of that, when it rains, then you have the flooding.
Let me just add this. When I finished my show last Thursday, Engineer Wood called me, and he said, he was even trying to call into the show, but he couldn't. And he said in 1964, they discovered that that's how come the Odo was over flooding its bank. So somewhere behind Agbogba, they purchased a huge land to build a dam. So it holds the water and then regulates the flow into the Odo. 66, they overthrow him and shelve so many of the things. And then obviously, my colleague chiefs, immediately they have their land, boom, they sell it. So they build this house on it. So the huge challenge is that water coming now how are we going to dam it, or how do we slow it down? So you continue.
And one would have expected that a country that is complaining about low level of water at the Akosombo would have had a way to redirect this water into the Akosombo, and will not allow the water just to go and waste. But I agree with Engineer Wood by saying that because of policy failure, our inability to follow through policies, if there's a change of regime, is what has resulted into some of this. That's why under the 1992 Constitution, there is a requirement under the Constitution for successive government to take over projects and not to abandon them. I'm sure we learn from our experiences the fact that we have...
We don't.
No, that is what has fed into the Constitution. Oh. And as to whether we are implementing it is another matter. But the reason for the constitutional provision that successive government should continue with projects that have been left over by past government is to ensure that we don't allow projects to go waste. This project that you are talking about, if under Nkrumah we could not do it, I'm sure successive governments have come. Why didn't we think about it? But now, like you are indicating, the land has gone back to... It has not gone back, actually. I'm not sure they returned the lands. I'm sure the chiefs all by themselves decided to take over the lands and do what they are doing. Government can acquire compulsorily that land. The laws allow the government to compulsorily acquire a land, and your entitlement is compensation. So if government feels strongly that that project must go on, I am of the view that government can use its state power to acquire that land, and then that project can come off.
Before I go on to my blame question, you see, at the time in 1964, I can imagine the hill was a thick forest. So when it rained, it would absorb a huge chunk of the rain. But now we have built, chopped the wood and cleared the land. So, I mean, the problem facing us is really, really huge.
It's huge. It's huge. There are some who are thinking that we should relocate Accra completely and take away the capital from Accra to another place. But be that as it may, I'm sure some people will still be left in Accra here. I'm not sure everybody will be evacuated. And so the flooding will still continue, and those few who are here will be caught up by the flood. I don't think that is the solution. The solution is to take the hard decisions. But who will do that? Because you would be thinking about the next elections. I think that we have missed the boat. The time that we could have done that was when we were under military regime, because you are not asking for anybody's vote. But as it is now, politicians will look back and will want to see whether what they are doing. And if you have a president who comes and says that, look, I am going to do one term, I don't care, I will implement the policies, I'm sure in his own party, people will victimize him and say that, look, you are not here for yourself. When you go, I'm also coming. So I think it's a tall order, but we may have to start somewhere.
Who can we blame? I mean, nearly 200 people died and everybody is still in office. Are we saying that everybody did their job well?
It is failure, policy failure is one of it, as in the case of Engineer Wu's claim that there was that dam that must be built. Policy failure is one of it, and this cuts across regimes. There's also the human element, our own intransigence. We put in leaders, but we don't assist the leaders to, as it were, rulers. The freedom that we enjoy in this country has been misconstrued to mean no restrictions, no restraints. Freedom means you can do what you want. But wherever there are freedoms, there are checks and balances. There are restraints. But in Ghana, the freedom is so much enjoyed that if you want to restrain people, they begin to complain. And that is what we are seeing. People build on waterways. State officials collude with developers to build anyhow. There are people who have licenses to build on waterways. How can that happen? Now, what can we do? The one who built on a waterway has infringed the law. The one who also gave the permit has colluded. The two of them can be charged for collusion because that place is not supposed to. Now, there's another thing that we need to take seriously in this country. Land use should be separated from land ownership. In this country, the two are combined and put together and given to one person. It resides in one person. I own my land. I can use it the way I want. We should be able to say that here in this area, this is the way we want the land to be used. It should be only story buildings. This should be only houses that are not story buildings. This is a residential area. But in Ghana, you see, because you have your piece of land, you can use it for residential area. The next person can use his plot of land for a piggery. The next person can use his land for church. Then you have a car washing bay. So land use should be separated from ownership. And if you are able to do that, I'm sure we'll be able to resolve some of these problems.
Dr. Richardson, let me bring you in now.
Yes.
Very good. So these are some of the challenges that confront us. I think it's a whole system failure, from planning, from lack of policy implementation, from the fear of getting votes, and then from individuals in discipline where they think, I mean, I say we haven't have freedom to abuse justice. So that's where we are. In order to stop the floods, we need to go back to the drawing board and probably change all these habits. I mean, how do we do that?
Okay. Thanks for the insights, provided by my colleague, Mr.
Abraham,
yeah, the policy failures. That was what I referred to. But indeed, we haven't had the policies at all. Policies have not existed. There's one thing having policies, and there's another thing failing to implement the policies. But we haven't had the policies at all. For most part of our history, some people were cocooned, some were doing revolution. White people had to build anyhow. So we haven't had plans. Look, Accra, this Odo River thing and that lagoon, Kole Lagoon, is not a problem. All major cities sit on rivers. London, Amsterdam, Moscow. Look, you count them. Even in Africa, Egypt. But it is because of the way these cities were consciously and deliberately planned and built. You see? And it has to do with the land use and all those. That's policy issues. But there are also institutional failures. So how do we deal with it? Yes, we have to attack the policy issues. And land policy is not the exclusive preserve of lawyers. Now, I learned about land policy, in social policy and planning at London School of Economics. All right? And it's not all about ownership rights, as my friend has pointed out, but it's also about use or investment rights. And the state is sovereign, and the state has the responsibility to control, to protect the territorial integrity of the land, of the people. And so the state has a central role to determine what land is used for what purpose. And all this, as I'm stated, must be framed by fundamental security considerations. Okay? So that is the policy, and I think if we take our national development planning the commission seriously and accept that development is all about the built environment, which includes residential estate, commercial estate, industrial estate, then we will know how we even fashion out our development plans. But there's also the institutional dimension. How we have structured our government departments, what I would call ministerial departments and agencies. In Ghana, we call them ministry departments and agencies. Previously, on the colonial rule, we called them departments. We had PW, the Public Works Department, Information Services Department, and these were ministerial departments. If you go to Britain, we call them departments, American departments, and that makes the areas of government activity clear. We seem to have conflicted and confused all these things. So we have Ministry of Environment, Science and Technology doing something, and then we have Ministry of Lands and Forestry, and we have Ministry of Local Government, which instead of combining these three areas and then demarcating the areas of activity clearly, we seem to have confused everything. Either we want to give jobs for the boys, we want to create jobs for the boys, or we do not understand these things well. So there's also that institutional failure. And when you do not have a proper understanding of things, you are not able to do things the right way. And this is why we see ourselves in this mess. Accra doesn't have a boundary. My brother is talking about rivers flowing on that. I've talked about rivers, in other areas. But Accra doesn't have even a boundary. Accra doesn't have a plan. So we must go back to the drawing board. Redesign our ministry. You don't need to have 22 ministries.
Accra has a plan. We're just not following it. Hold on. I think Accra has a plan, but we're not following it.
Accra has a plan. When you ask the AMA boss, the mayor, he will tell you that Accra has a plan. But I think that the problem has to do with implementation and the fact that we lack resources to follow through on these plans. But Accra has a plan, and that is why we are able to know that some structures are sited at places that are not supposed to be. So I disagree if he says that Accra has no plan. What I think the problem is that we have not been able to follow through the plan, and that is why we are where we are.
The other thing, going back to those who give permits, that's easy to find, isn't it? If you came and my house was here and he said, "Nana, where's your permit?" and I brought it, clearly he would say, "Oh, Abraham Maliba gave you the permission."
The person's name will be there.
But we never hear those persons.
I think today the Minister for Environment made a point. He went around town and indicated that houses that are situated at places that are not supposed on waterways must be removed. And he got to a place where there was a filling station or so, and the person produced the permit. He realized that once it was a permit, he needed to be a bit cautious because that could raise some legal issues. But he indicated that the person who issued that permit would be called to answer to some questions. So we are able, I agree with you, we are able to know the officer. If he's even gone on retirement, we are able to know the officer who did that.
But you see, this permit issue has come back so many times, and we never get a big headline story of somebody who issued a false permit and is being punished. So I'm sure if I were there today, and everybody has a price. So if somebody comes with, and the price was right, you may, because there's no consequence.
You remember the Melcombe disaster 2 years ago, I think so?
Yeah.
There was this issue of one of the officers who was being prosecuted for actually issuing that permit to that building. My understanding is that they are in court, but you have not heard much about it. I'm sure maybe the matter is dragging. And you are right. So if people begin to see this, what they see is that there is somebody who has, you are emboldened because there's no punishment. And people who are in that situation in terms of issuing those permits will not be afraid to do those things. So I think that time has come for us to say never again, and to say that, look, what is past is gone, but now let's start on a clean sheet. Let's ensure that people are punished for the wrongs that they commit.
If I bought a piece of land in good faith, and came to the planning office in good faith and said, "Look, I want to build my house here." Planner says, "Give me X amount of money," and I give you a plan and I pay. Is it my fault? How am I supposed to know it's the waterway?
No, I'm hearing you saying that the planning officer says that give me this much and I'll give you. Is it the official fees? If it's not the official fees, but it is
who pays
bribe,
the official fees?
Fine. If you pay the official fees, then it's not your fault.
Yeah.
But if you are being told to pay a bribe so that no matter what it is.
See, but that you wouldn't know. You see, because even those who go for regular payment, we won't deny it. Sometimes maybe you call it, "Oh, he worked so hard, so you take 1,000 because you looked after me well." Whatever it is. But I have a permit which is official, is stamped to say that you are allowed to build here. So I go ahead and I build my filling station. EPA says they don't care about my neighbors. The planning guy says he doesn't care about the flood. I built my business. If the state pulls it down, where do I get my money from? You can't give me permission to build and turn around to break it down.
Yeah, you can be absolved of blame if you follow through the processes and then you got your permit. If you did not cut corners, if you did not, as a matter of fact, pay your way to have your permit.
That you wouldn't know.
No, what I'm saying is that if you honestly follow through the processes, but it is just that the official or town and country planning, environmental protection, and maybe the AMA zone the place as a dwelling place and offered it to you, in that regard, you cannot be blamed. Then we'll have to go to the agencies that saw that that place was not supposed to be a place for dwelling, and yet they zone it for you to. The blame will now go to the state officials. But for you, you would have done nothing wrong.
So then I can, get compensation or?
Oh yes, in that regard, yes, you are talking about the legal consequence. In that regard, you would have to be given compensation if they pull down your structures. Yes, that one, you have to get compensation for it. Because it's none of your fault. It is not as if you colluded with the state official to put up your building there. You honestly believe that you were entitled to build there and you did build.
Abraham, you see, let me stress again. If today I went to the planning office and I want to build a house, let's say the legal fees are 500, so I paid my 500.
Yes. But
back though, I've given this guy probably maybe another 2,000. That you wouldn't know. Nobody is going to know. But I have my receipt. You see, so whether I colluded or not,
no. The issue is, were you aware that that portion of the land was not supposed to be used for a dwelling place, and you are not supposed to put up a structure?
Certainly in court, I'm going to say no. Certainly in front of a judge, I'll say no.
Then I hear you now say that you are aware, but just that you want to deny.
No, what I'm
talking
saying
about somebody who is innocent, somebody who is unaware. The law comes to the aid of somebody who has gone through the processes without knowledge.
Once I have a permit,
yes,
and it's a proper permit, not a fraudulent permit.
Yes.
However I attained it, nobody knows. So then I have to be absolved. You see, that's what I'm saying. And there are so many permits out there which have been claimed. However it was claimed, nobody knows. But the permit itself is real. It's come from a proper office, signed by a proper planner. So then they are all, the state is then liable when they pull all these things down. Because he's not going to come and say, I bribed him. And the officer says he's not going to say, oh, he bribed me and I gave it to him. So it means that all these houses you pull down, they're going to come out and say, I'm a victim.
Your site plan would show whether a place is supposed to be used for buildings or is supposed not to be used. Your site plan will tell. Your site plan will indicate that this is a waterway and this is not a waterway and this is a road. Your site plan will indicate. Now if the site plan indicates, it means that you are not supposed to build there. So if you are aware of this, and this is notice to you, if you are aware of this and you go ahead and then obtain a permit on a site plan that says that this is a waterway, then you have colluded. Yes, that's how they look at it.
Dr. Richardson, I mean, we're driving by and we see some petrol stations and gas stations in places where even the layman or with the lay eyes, you sometimes think, this is a bit too close to that house, or this is too close to that school or that lorry station. But they are supposed to have gone through EPA, and EPA, with their expert eyes, sometimes say no until it blows up. I mean, so what do we do? Do we, rewrite the rules for EPA? How do we work?
Nana, I'm sorry. It's still the volume is still very low, at your end.
I am talking about fuel stations.
If they could raise the volume a bit.
Okay, I'm sure the engineers will be doing that from behind the scenes, but let me raise my voice, see if you can hear me. I'm talking about petrol stations or fuel stations that are situated too close to residential, areas, and they're supposed to have an EPA certificate. How do we rectify this?
Thanks, Rana. You see, all the discussion so far indicates that land use or land policy in Ghana, is still based on a feudal system. I mean, who owns the land in Accra? The chiefs or whatever, they sell them. And when the politicians come, they take the best of places for themselves and develop posh houses for themselves, And then when that happens, along the main trunk route, people also follow up and then build houses. No, if my brother is claiming that Accra has a plan, then that plan is outdated and out-fashioned, okay? Because I don't think there was any plan for the development of Adenta. Just as a private real estate developers have sprung up. They are just mushrooming all over the place and building at Dodua, even Porton, without any well-developed integrated sewage and drainage system. That links one community to another, one town to another. Now, about this filling station thing, I think I heard somebody claim that he's counted about 6,000 or so filling stations. And if we take the one at Circle, the Goil one, which, got bent, it was first, I think, Egypt, which was a joint Ghana-Italian, fair, built in the 1960s, I suspect, between 1970 and 1969, thereabout. At that time, Circle had not been planned, for a residential or commercial area or district. Okay? We only had one road, and the Kwamukuma built another one, to form this ring road. Over time, we have seen, especially from the early 1990s, we've seen massive, drift of people to the Circle area. So much so that it has become indeed the central business district of Accra. That whereas by 8 o'clock, nightlife in Okenshi area is nearly gone. Circle is 24 hours. Commercial and human activity. But there was no well laid out plan either for residential estates or commercial estates. We only have the industrial area in North Kaneshi. No drainage system to accommodate the amount of sewage and all those kind of things that will be, So the problem there is that we have, if you want to cite filling stations, one thing I know about filling stations is that they are restricted and security areas. If you go abroad, you can't just go and loiter around the filling station. I mean, you drive in, you park your car, you take the pump, you serve yourself, and you go in and pay. If you attempt to run away, you would have committed offense. Anyway, you'll be committed offense, or you can be blocked. But no, you'll be charged for, attempting to steal and stealing or whatever. Okay? So we have lost that sense. When I was growing up, we only had Shell and Texaco. And these were located, at various points where there were no residential development around. Because the colonial government had this in view that it was a restricted area and it was a security area. For a very long time, the politicians, we've heard, I don't have the evidence, but we've heard the rumors or people saying that it's the politicians who have been building these, filling stations.
Okay, doctor,
And
hold on. Let me take a quick break, and then when I come back, we will continue. But when I come back, I just want to find out one thing about. We always say people are building in waterways, and therefore we hurriedly go in and break it. And most of the time, they break the houses and still leave the debris within the same waterway. And I need to see how is it that when they break the houses, they don't clear it. I'm going to take a break. We're coming straight back. Don't move. Thank you very much for staying, and welcome back. We're discussing the aftermath of the floods. And indeed, so many souls were lost needlessly, honestly, really, really needlessly. And I think it's an indictment on this generation, maybe the one before us. Everyone just waits and says, policy failure. I'm not going to do it because I'm going to lose votes. I won't do it because I'll lose votes. And here we are today. And indeed, we, the same people who go out and queue to vote, are the ones who will be flooded, and not the guys who are voted for. So maybe it's about time we came together and demanded accountability without feeling so ashamed that, well, I'm NPP or NDC, and if I complain now, my party will be looking bad, so I'll keep quiet. This is what will happen. But Abraham, one thing you realize is this has happened, so they'll go out, they'll demolish, and I bet you any money, 3-4 months' time, all the rubble are still right there where the water is supposed to pass. I'm thinking, should they clear it and just bill the guy who owns the house? Or, I mean, because otherwise it becomes like spite rather than, clearing the waterway.
We need a clear policy on demolition, if only we think that that is the way to go. Now, if you demolish, I agree with you, the debris should not be left there. But do you have to surcharge the person whose property has been demolished? My understanding is that they will first have to ask you to demolish your own structure. If you fail to demolish your structure, if the government then decides to demolish that structure, you will be surcharged for that. But you are talking about demolition and debris, but you even find our cleanup exercises. We bring out the garbage from the gutters. We just leave them by the close to the gutters again. And when it rains, it goes back in there. What is it that we cannot, first of all, create or build gutters that are covered? Now, if we cannot, then when we clear those garbage and bring them out of the gutters, we have to be able to send them far away from where we have just taken them off. The other thing has to do with these fires that my colleague on phone just talked about. Petrol is a safe commodity, provided you use it the way it's supposed to be used and you respect the limitations and the restrictions. We drive in our cars with petrol. People use gas in their homes. We don't always hear fire and all those. So, first and foremost, it is a safe commodity, provided you use it within the context within which you have to use it. But what do we see? People are simply careless. People go to the pumps, and when the pump attendant says, switch off your engine, while they feel, they refuse. They say they want to be in a cooler. The air conditioner is working. They want to be feeling cool whilst you are putting that is recklessness. We are told that phones are not supposed to be used close to these petrol stations. But we find at times attendants who are supposed to know receiving and making calls at the forum, at the what do they call it? The
pump area.
The pump area. So it is our recklessness and our inability to respect the rules that is making some of these things to happen. But I think that if we are able to, and that is NPA would have a responsibility here. The National Petroleum Authority has a responsibility here. And I think that they have to intensify their education of the pump attendants. They do that, but they have to intensify it, and also sanctions as a way of punishment, withdrawing licenses of petrol stations. And that, I think, is our being as a people, how to crack the whip. That's our being.
Funny enough, that's why I was trying to interject to talk about cracking the whip. And we are so afraid to implement or enforce any law. It doesn't matter how small the law is. We are so scared to implement it. And I think gradually we are all, paying the price.
It's because Ghana is a small country and we know each other. We know each other in the sense that you know one big man somewhere who can intervene on your behalf. Day in, day out, I'm sure you have received calls from people who want you to intervene on something. You also know another big man. So because of the close-knit nature of the Ghanaian society, sometimes we are able to intervene, and then these laws are not implemented. But again, if you find somebody who is strict and wants to implement the law, society would consider him as an outcast. This is a person who has no human feelings. So there's even reward by the society for people who are able to break the law and are able to maneuver their way out. A person who is strict and applies the law is rather seen as somebody who is a person who should not be allowed in society.
Let's shift the gear a bit. Even though it's not the NDC's fault, at the moment, you know, Mr. Mahama is the president with his, you know, team of guys running. So whether Kufuor did nothing, Rawlings did nothing, whoever did nothing, they are the people being paid so that we don't get flood. So, I mean, how much of the blame should they take to make sure that, listen, it's turnaround time? And I think maybe they have a goodwill where, because of the shocker, if they move, everybody will keep quiet. But how much of blame should government take?
And this answer is going to be tailored in accordance with the way I answered the Dumso. With the Dumso, I have indicated that it is not a creation of President Mahama. Dumso existed long before, and this flash also predates Mahama as a president.
Before he was born.
Yes, but the onus lies with him because he has taken the reins of government to solve the problem. And so, if today there are issues that people are complaining about, it is justified for people to say that the government of the day must solve the problem. And I'm sure that President Mahama himself would agree that he has to solve some of these problems. I remember him say that people are blaming him for the Dumso. He has agreed, he thinks that it is his responsibility to fix it. But in fixing it, you have to make some people uncomfortable. And that's why when he visited the sites, the flood areas, on the 4th of June, he indicated that tough decisions must be taken. And if those tough decisions are taken, nobody should come around and say that they should put a human face to it. So I am sure that he himself and his ministers are aware that there is a responsibility on them to resolve the matter. And that's why I have seen the ministers going out, the environmental minister is out and about trying to see what he can do. But I think that there's a time to draw the line. And this is a time for this government to draw the line and say that this is the time for us to implement all the policies that we think that will bring about the what I would term as sanity within the Ghanaian society. I am sure that when this happens, you, the media, will not come saying that this government is insensitive, because these are some of the words that are used to break the muscles of government. I think that what the government will need is support when these measures come on board. Yeah.
Now, I wish we can continue this conversation because it's going to be very cruel. I mean, if you look at Old Fadama, close to 100,000 people. If you look at all those who live along the railways and the Odo, God knows how many more thousands live there. And so if you draw the line one day and said you're all move to where? Create another constituency somewhere for them. It's a huge task, and I don't envy anybody who's going to draw that line.
But this flood that we experience, I can tell you the amount of rain that we had for the 2 days could flood any city in the world, even in Texas. But the problem is, did we have the structures to be able to minimize it? That's the difference between here in Ghana and elsewhere.
Well, folks, that's all time will allow us. Thank you very much for watching. And I want to say All My African Attire is produced by Tantees. And you can reach Tantees on 024 366 2001. 024 366 2001. I want to say thank you very much to Abraham. Thank you very much to Dr. Richardson. And tomorrow we'll be back to do this all over again. Thank you very much for watching. Bro, thank you very much.